To introduce everyone, we have a special guest on today's podcast. It is Laila from followlaila.com. She is an amazing tour designer for Italy. She's going to be discussing Rome with us today. Now, obviously, probably a lot of you have been to Rome, and we all think we know about these destinations, but we don't. Believe you me, tour guides are very experienced in what they do. They have a magnificent array of information inside their brains that with hidden gems for certain holidays and different ways of selling those holidays and tours to different customers that all of you will be sending hopefully next year. Obviously, we've got the current situation, but again, like I said in the previous podcast, this is a fantastic time to sort of go through these destinations, understand them a bit more, especially from a tour guide's point of view. They know the destination better than anyone else. So again, just to say a massive thank you to Laila before she starts for joining today's podcast. I really hope all of you enjoy it, and hopefully we get some good feedback after this. She is a tour guide of Italy, so if Rome goes well, hopefully, fingers crossed, we can look at other destinations too. Now I will just put you on to Laila now. Like I said, please have an open mind with this. I know a lot of us think that we know Rome. I mean, it's not just the Colosseum, it's not just the Trevi Fountain, it's not just the Roman Forum. There's thousands of things to do, and I think Laila is going to give us a really good breakdown. Obviously, this is our second podcast, first face-to-face, actually, other than the technology issues just a minute ago. So the idea of today is sort of to, as we spoke previously, is just to give an idea of what Rome is, what Rome means to you, how you sell those tours, and just a little bit about yourself at first, and why and how you got into this.
So, welcome, and thank you for inviting me. My name is Laila, and I have a little LLC in Florida called followlaila.com. We're celebrating 20 years of success, but my story starts a long time ago. I was born in Genova, Italy, and then was raised in Silicon Valley. What is Silicon Valley today? And then studied there and got my interpreting degree in Paris, and started traveling the world. I was always very, very curious. And one day I had a contract, simultaneous interpreting on alternative energy sources in Rome with the research office, government research office. And there I was living in front of the Pantheon, not knowing where I was, not understanding where I was, because I was constantly working. And when I was free, the Pantheon was closed, or I was traveling, visiting different places. And since I do have relatives here, I was sneaking around, getting to know a lot of places in Italy. And one day I decided I'm going to stay in Rome and see what's going on here. And I walked across the street and the Pantheon was open. Well, I think I still feel that emotion today, because when I walked in, I kept seeing the dome, this big, beautiful dome of the Pantheon. The moon every month kept going by, but the Pantheon was always there. So I walked in and I thought, what is the mystery here? There's something here. There's a mystery here. There's something that's pulling me in. And that changed my life. And I started to get very interested, and I was in love with the Pantheon, and I still am. It's one of the, I was so curious that I convinced the architect that's responsible for the restorations and the monument to take me inside the dome itself, which is impossible. And I did that for years. And I got to really have a feeling for the Pantheon. The Pantheon is alive. It's a monument that was made 2,000 years ago, the end of the 1st century BC. But it's alive. It has a soul. All of the monuments you've seen, maybe you've been to Rome thousands of times, but you've seen these monuments, but they're not just stone. They talk. And as man of the 1600s would say, like Gian Lorenzo Bernini, a great sculptor, a great architect of the 1600s, he would also say, they are alive. They rise from, they're born from the earth and they rise. And therefore you sculpture them from the earth on up. As a matter of fact, if you come to Rome and you really look for its soul, which is what you have to do, because Rome is a city of 3,000 years. And in these 3,000 years, everything has happened here in Rome. And this is not a city like any other city. Once you come here, you always return. And I know this because I have this experience now. I kept working as an interpreter, but then with my free time, would stay here and studied. And pretty soon, before I knew it, I took an exam. And that exam brought me to a little license, which was called at that time a very, very valuable license, but I didn't know how important it was. I could go anywhere in Rome. Licensed tour guide. I was the first American licensed tour guide, but I had a double passport. So, and so then I started working a little bit and I really enjoyed it. Interpreting, simultaneous interpreting is tough. It's interesting, but it's tough. My project was interesting, but it was tough like all of them, but I enjoyed it. But when I worked, I had, as a tour guide, I had a good time because I could talk to these monuments and they would respond. Now, Rome is called the Eternal City because it's eternal. It'll never die. Every time there was, throughout all of these 3,000 years, every time there was any kind of a disaster, an earthquake, a fire, or enemies destroying the cities and the churches and that, it always picked itself up and came right back. So maybe even this time it will. I believe it will. It was always better and always stronger. Just think, the Roman Empire develops. Rome is born, or the date of its foundation is 753 BC. And then it develops from a regal, little tiny, in a little valley called the Roman Forum. It develops into a republic with a form of government, the Senate, and military, intricate military organization, intricate political organization, which was transmitted down to us today, the Republican form of government. And it conquered the world for 1,200 years. And it had 250,000 paved roads all over the world. Can you imagine? You see this army approaching you, strong and determined, secure, and they conquered the world. They were very functional, but they didn't just take, because ancient civilizations, maybe I'm talking too much about this, but I'm getting to a point, I think. Ancient civilizations were cultured. They each had a library. They had literary men writing the history. So we have a lot of documentation. Each one of these areas of the ancient world had their own language. Each one of them wrote in their own language. They wrote on stone, on terracotta, on marble, on and even on the Paris. All of this was transmitted down to us. Somehow, somewhere we piece things together. Even today we find pieces of something that means something. Every day we find something new in the whole Mediterranean world. Pretty soon they had conquered the whole Mediterranean world. So when you come to Rome, where do you come? You come to a multi-ethnic city, a city that englobes the whole ancient world. So if you're standing on top of the Spanish Steps and you're looking down, for example, what do you see? You see the whole world. You see all the different phases that Rome went through. Rome has a lot of hidden places, a lot of secrets. It's a charming lady, a very sensual lady, and she attracts everyone. The soul of Rome.
When you talk about the history, I mean, I can obviously hear the passion that you have. I can really feel it. I mean, when you're talking about that level of history, and it is steeped far back, as far as we can even think of. I mean, the passion that comes from you, and the level of history. How do you combine that when you do a tour? So like you obviously talked about the Spanish Steps and the Pantheon. When you're building a tour, and I can hear that passion from when you speak, are you building those tours as part of that passion? Are you building them in terms of a story, or are you? How do you build those tours? Is it that story level, or you get into it, or am I just interrupting?
That's a good question. You're right. I was just giving you an introduction, but I work with my people. I work through referrals. So my clients are often the same clients that come back year after year for a different experience. So I might create a theme tour that connects to whatever we've done before. Or I might, in Rome itself, or I'll continue the theme tour through the country of Italy. Italy is one and only. Like Rome is one and only. Okay, I'm in love with this country because I think it is the most beautiful country in the world. We have over 70% of all of the UNESCO sites, but being a UNESCO site could mean even being a town is a UNESCO site. So you understand, 70% means nothing. This whole country is a UNESCO site. So getting back to it, they contact me. I contact them back with questions. Then we talk about it like this. We call each other, and we Zoom each other, and we talk about it. And so that we can understand where we're at and what we want to do. And my clients become my extended family. I know, I would say 80% or they come back, or they send their children or their neighbors, and we have a relationship. Through this tragic moment, we've been writing to each other. They've been calling me, so it's a very good relationship. I would like to extend this family, make it larger, because Rome is going to come out of this. It's going to be tough, but Rome will come out of this like it always has, and stronger than before, because it's a very, very strong lady. Everything has happened here, and this is the city of the Caesars, the city of the popes. We have the smallest country in the world within our own city limits. Did I answer your question though?
Yeah. I mean, what I hear from you is that you are, I mean, like I would say with, even for every agent on this call, is about being personal with your client, right? And I can hear that from you. It seems that when you're building a tour, you're not just giving someone an option, you're creating an option for them based on knowledge, not just you should go here because everybody goes there. You're building it based on passion and knowledge and history that you've obtained from your learnings. And that's the best way to create these types of tours, and it's not always done that way. A lot of it is, we've turned into a sort of world where people just go online and they book because that's what TripAdvisor says, right? That's not how the world should be. There are so many different landmarks. There's so many different hidden gems, and I'm sure thousands of them in Rome.
Yeah, you can see the same monument in so many different ways. Everybody's been to the Colosseum. Everybody's been to the Sistine Chapel in St. Peter's, but it's how you see it. And besides, I might even build an itinerary and change it as we go along, because you understand that people become interested, or perhaps see something else. So you have to be able to be very, very flexible. You have to be a friend. And you have to be a friend in Italy for them, in Rome for them. The Colosseum is not only where gladiator fights went on. It's not only a really a structure which is an incredibly unique structure, but it is the first time that you have a militarily run online construction system. Was I clear? It takes a lot.
Yeah.
But is that clear? Because why? Because in order to construct the Colosseum, it was necessary to get the unions. They had unions at that time. Already in the first century, they had unions with Augustus. But anyway, they had unions. And the emperor had to deal with the unions in order to get their help. Because after Nero, Rome was poor. Nobody had a job, nobody had any money, nobody had any food, something like today. And therefore, when Vespasian got to Rome, he said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to think of one thing first, just to get some money into the cash box. I'm going to make public toilets all over the city, because Rome was always crowded with visitors from everywhere. But they had sleeping places, inns, eating places. Sure, those were all private enterprise. They didn't have public latrines. And so what he said, I'm going to make those. And so they were all over the city. And they were made like an S. You enter from one side and the other, and they had a common hole. It worked. They paid and they entered. And he started getting money into the, and then he thought, now I've got to really give the Romans a gift, give them something. And the working class is ready to work. They're willing to do everything. But he has his son Titus. Am I getting too long? Is this too long?
No, it's fine.
I'll make it real quick. So he has his son Titus, who is in Jerusalem trying to quiet down a revolution. And he calls him and he says, oh, Titus, you got to come over here. You got to bring me all the gold to the Temple of Solomon. You got to bring me all the slaves you can, because we have to build an amphitheater, the first stone amphitheater in Rome. This is not the first stone amphitheater ever built by the Romans. There were others, but this is the first stone one. And so he does that, but that is 70. By the time he gets here, it's 72. You know, he's got a little bit to do. And he gets here and he brings 40,000 slaves and all the gold. And so, meanwhile, Vespasian has organized everything, drew up the plans for the amphitheater, and started training the working class with the help of the unions. Each one, whether they were literate or illiterate, or whether they were good at doing one thing or the other, they each were trained in their field. And if it was just to put a nail into one spot, they were the best ones to do it. So everything was set. All they needed to do was find the right spot. Meanwhile, they're looking for the right spot, and the only spot was right there where Nero had a man-made lake. It was difficult. They had to tear it down. Okay, I'm not going to go through all this. It's going to take up our time. But it was built like that. The Roman working class was working, and they had hours. They had workman's comp. And they each had their place, and it was on a pyramid form, okay, with supervisors. What did you do? What to do with the slaves? You're going to ask me. Well, the gold, we know. They turned it into money and got, a lot of things done. The slaves, they said, well, Romans, the rich Romans were always rich. The poor Romans just got poor, which is what always happens in the world. And so they said, we are going to sell them to the Romans. Romans love to have lots of slaves, hundreds slaves. You know, they love having slaves. So they bought it, they sold them, and they made a lot of money, and they continued. And everything was done on an online construction system, militarily run, Roman style. The Romans were very functional people. They were not sophisticated like the Greeks and like the Egyptians, like the Etruscans, but they learned from other peoples. They learned, they absorbed their knowledge. Okay, so my point was, you go to the Colosseum and you can see it in so many different ways.
Look, I'll be honest with you. I've been there myself, and I did not know a single thing about that. That's the critical thing. When we're selling these holidays, we're always selling the idea that we're selling an experience, right? An experience for the end consumer based on our own insights. Sometimes our insights could be a little bit too tunnel vision. There's so much information and history steeped in it that we can't possibly provide that in every sort of tour. So I mean, for you, so say we've had a conversation and you've seen that I'm interested in the more steeped but obscure sort of hidden history of Rome. What would be a sort of classic tour for you? What would you offer? If I said to you, I don't want to see the Colosseum. I've been there, I've done that, but I haven't. But is there sort of hidden gems inside Rome that you would suggest for people to look at?
Yes, some of them I don't share so easily because they're hidden secrets that I don't want a lot of people to see. So only if they deserve it do I show them.
You're going to give us one today.
Okay, let's see. You're walking along Piazza Navona, and you know which one that is? That's the oblong. It's a racetrack of the end of the 1st century BC, and I'm sorry, AD, end of the 1st century AD, and it was a racetrack. And with time, the fall of the Roman Empire and all this that happens anyway, you find that pretty soon in the 1600s, to make this really short, in the 1600s, you have this beautiful long oblong square. Pope Innocent X Pamphili wants to create a beautiful front yard for a palace that he's just built and another church that he's just built. And so he calls in great artists, Borromini, Bernini, and many others. But Borromini and Bernini in the 1600s, they were rivals, and they are the reason for which we have such a monumental, expressive city in the buildings made in the 1600s. Because after the long Middle Ages, the Renaissance, many things happened, but in the 1600s, all of a sudden, Rome blooms, and it is the city, the most important city, so rich, so elaborate. When you visit this square, you know that underneath, because Rome is in various strata, every time there was an earthquake, anything at all, it would be buried and built on top of, buried and built on top of. And so you know that underneath the road you're walking on, the piazza you're walking on, there's another level, and maybe another level, and maybe a 4th level. All you have to do is go down there. So there is a way of going down there. Several years ago, about 7 years ago, they did some excavations, and you can see the stadium underneath by going under there. That's not really a secret, but you walk along. You leave there, you visit the fountain, you leave there, and you go into a little alleyway that looks like it's ugly, but it's not, because you're walking next to a church. You're walking next to a church. You go around it, and there's a church, and then you go look to the left. It's a little tiny church. Look to the left, Santa Maria della Pace, and there's an entrance to a museum. And there's this rounded square. It used to be a monastery, but then they had to cut up a few pieces and move them around for reasons of building other things and other families that have moved in. And you go in, you surpass the ticket office. You're not interested. It's a museum, but it's actually an exhibit hall. So there's usually a show of some kind. And you go straight into this cloister which is at the end of the 1400s. Il chiostro del Bramante. There's such harmony there that you feel like you're being embraced. It's calm. There's nobody there. Then you see these stairs. You go up these stairs and you find, and very tight stairs, worn out, and you go up there and you see that there's a little modern coffee tables all the way around the cloister with a little bar that serves a delightful light lunch and drinks, aperitifs. You just walk past that and you keep on going, just a few steps more, and there are 3 steps, 1, 2, 3. You go up those 3 steps and you're in a salon with perfumed air, soft music, couches, lounge chairs, and a window. So you're attracted by this window. You go to it, you look through it, and what do you see? Frescoes of the Sibyls by Raphael. One day, Raphael went in there and frescoed some Sibyls, but you can never see it because it's usually closed. And you don't get the same view if you go in from the front door of the church in any case. But you can sit there and have an aperitif, have your lunch. You have Wi-Fi, you can work, you can relax, you can listen to music, and it is one of those lovely places, hidden places. But then maybe you want to walk downstairs, and it's almost sundown. So it's around 6 o'clock, 6:30, and you go around the corner and go up this enormous palace that's connected to the church that Pope Innocent X Pamphili had constructed. And you go all the way up to the top where the dome, the round dome is, and you're standing at the same height as the round dome. And from there you have a view on all of Navona Square. Not only, you take a spiral staircase and go up, and there's a terrace. It's called the Sunset Terrace. Now, that's where I like to take people that will enjoy seeing all the Roman rooftops. And in that direction is St. Peter's Dome, and the sun sets right there. And you're drinking your aperitif and enjoying Rome.
Laila, I can see with your tours, you're almost like a storyteller. Like I was lulled when you was talking then about the tour. So I would actually, when this is all over, I actually want to go over and do a tour with you myself, because that was a lovely directional storytelling and history information. It felt like a journey I was on with you. So I was trying to picture it whilst I was there. Now I can absolutely see why people book tours with you. I mean, I think today, I think there are certain aspects of when people travel, they want to do tours, but I don't know if they really capture the sort of information and knowledge that you guys present. Because even myself, I've been on tours, and I think maybe it's because you're traveling quite constant, and maybe you're a little bit tired, I guess. I haven't been lulled like that from a travel agent. That's what I'm trying to get at. I haven't been lulled like that. I've been, that's amazing. I've kind of looked at it and been like, wow, I can't believe people built something like that. But being steeped in the history and providing a story alongside it, I'm literally, like, I know I've said it before, but I feel like I'm walking down and up those steps and down those 3 steps that you just mentioned, and viewing that myself. So I can imagine the people that are touring with you are having such an amazing experience. I mean, when you are doing those sort of secret tours. How are you selling that to the consumers? How would, I mean, obviously after this, I would encourage a lot of our agents to look at your tours and hopefully book with you. How would you sort of sell that to the end consumer? Because a lot of the people that we have on the call are independent agents and they own their own businesses like yourself, and they would need to try and push this and try and sell it. Obviously, Rome is easy to sell in a sense of people want to go there, of course, but there's those niche markets of people that really truly want to see the destination, not just to be on holiday. They want to be there and steeped in that history of the city. So when you are selling, how do you sell those sort of secrets? Do you present them like you did now, or how do you do it?
There's a phrase I use: walking around Rome with Laila, all one word. And I think to see Rome, what you have to do is put on your shoes and walk out. This is the biggest museum in the world. There's no place like Rome because everything is a museum. I mean, just think, we have a mixture of ancient Roman monuments next door to monuments that are of the Renaissance period, or monuments of the 1600s, which is the elaborate theatrical, very obviously elaborate, and they're all speaking to you. There's always a message everywhere. And then you also have the neoclassical period. Rome never died. It came up and down. It came up and down. And therefore you have all this mixture of these different things, but it's free. All of these things are free. This is a free museum. So just tell me, you want to see real Rome? You don't have to go pay a ticket. You can do it if you want. And the way things are going to be going now for a while, I think it's going to be difficult because you have to limit. But you can see a lot of secret places that people don't go to because people don't go to them. But you can see a lot of secret places by just walking around Rome with Laila. And if you communicate with me, I will send you a program. I will send you a program, or maybe I have some already, or maybe I will have some already. But they come off the top of my head when I talk to people.
No, definitely. I mean, after this, I mean, it'd be amazing if you can share some of those, and I'm sure the agents on the call today will be very grateful to sort of see those, and I'm sure encourage people to book for next year. Fingers crossed if everything gets back to normal. I mean, obviously, I'm conscious of time. We are plodding through. I always thought podcasts would be quite difficult. They're obviously a lot easier than what I thought. You can talk forever, especially about travel. Now, one thing I have to ask, because it's almost a part and parcel of Italy, is food. Now, obviously, you are a tour guide. I do know there is a museum of pasta, which means food really does mean a lot to the Italians. So, I mean, obviously, as part of your tours, do you do those sort of food culinary sort of tours?
Yes, many times I take them to particular markets that I like. And as we walk around, we see food. But in the markets themselves, we have little food stalls where they have a pot boiling and they're doing pasta. Or maybe they're frying fish and they're purchasing it from this booth over here and this booth over here, and they're making lunch. So I say, today we're going to go to a particular place for lunch. It's not going to cost much. It's going to be a little rugged, a little sporty. You trust me? Walking around Rome with Laila. And so I take them to the market, and they see, oh, I want this pasta. No, I want this. And pretty soon, before we know it, we've got different dishes. And but we have a table, and we bring everything there, and everybody's tasting everybody else's. But every region has its own traditions, because Rome is Lazio. It's but then we have Naples, then we have Sicily, then we have, every region is different. They have a different history, a different heritage, and therefore different cultural heritage as well. And here in Rome, we're known for our pastas. And the pastas are matriciana, cacio e pepe. Cacio e pepe is the number one. It hits everybody. So and I start to talk about food and what kind, because everybody's getting hungry. It's we've been walking. So you talk to them about food and you say, how do you make that? How is that? It's a cheese pasta, but I wouldn't really call it a cheese pasta. It's a particular cheese called pecorino cheese. It comes from sheep, sheep. And it's the sheep cheese is actually the oldest cheese in the world. And it was used by the Romans. They would carry it with them along with spelt to feed the armies. It's very tasty and it lasts forever. You can keep it forever. But anyway, so how do you make this cheese pasta? It's called cacio e pepe, which means cheese and pepper. That's all it is. And remember that in the Italian cuisine, I also organize cooking lessons. So in the Italian cuisine, the real Italian cuisine, simplicity, and fresh products. Very little. With very little, you can make a fantastic dish. So what you do is you've got your spaghetti boiling right over here. By the way, not mushy, huh? We don't like it mushy here. Nice and then we grate the pecorino cheese in a bowl. And when the pasta is ready to be drained, we leave just a tidbit in the pot. We need that because we need to amalgamate the grated pecorino cheese with that tidbit of hot, gluey water. So you pour everything, all the water out, and just leave that tidbit, and then put that spaghetti into the bowl, and you have to mix it immediately. Immediately. Timing is important. You mix it, and it becomes cream. Some people in the United States say that they have to put cream in it. You don't put cream in it. If you do it like this, but timing is of the essence. You put it in your plate and then sprinkle a little bit of black pepper on it. It's to die for. By the time I finish explaining this, they're so hungry they want to go to the first place that makes the best cacio e pepe. And guess what? I'm right around the corner, so it's not wasting any time.
I thought you was going to tell us about an amazing restaurant, and it turns out to be yours.
Oh, no. There are a lot of them. The one that it's near Navona Square that I think is the best one. He's the king of matriciana, but also the king of cacio e pepe. We don't know if he's open right now because we won't know until next week. But Memmo. The name of the restaurant is Memmo. And he's a nice and hearty man. You can see he enjoys his pasta. And he comes from the mountains, the high mountains outside of Rome. He's a real hardy Roman. And so, and that's the story.
Have I made you hungry?
You had lunch yet?
Yeah, oh God, yes. I will be eating after this, that's for sure. So, I mean, obviously you have food, you have everything in Italy. There's so much to offer. If I was to ask you, you had to choose three places to go to. One church out of the 900 plus churches you have, and a fountain. What would you do? I know I'm springing it on you. Just three places to go to. One being a church and one being a fountain. What would you do? Would you go to the normal? Would you go to St. Peter's Basilica and Trevi? or would you look outside? Because I mean, obviously you have over 280 fountains, right? That is an immense amount of fountains, and then you have 900 plus churches. If you had to choose in that way, what would you do?
Well, of course, it all depends on where I am, but fountain, that's really tough. Well, you know, if you look at Navona Square, if you look at Navona Square, that is really a fantastic fountain. It really talks to you, it tells you a whole story. So I know it's big and I know everybody sees it, but you've got to understand it. There's a lot of symbolism in that fountain. And you can't just walk by and say, oh, look, Benini made this fountain. It's called the Fountain of the Four Rivers. No, there's a lot of story in there. So maybe that would be one of them, but then it depends on the day. It could be another one, you know. And as far as churches, I think the early Christian churches, Paleo-Christian churches, are my favorite churches because you really see the story of the early Christians. Santa Cecilia, for example. I would go to Santa Cecilia. I would take you there. There's a fountain there too that's beautiful. But Santa Cecilia is a particular experience. You can only take people there if they're sensitive enough to understand it. Because Santa Cecilia of today is up here, but it's really an early Christian church built on top of the home of Cecilia, who live. So when you go downstairs, also you visit the home of Cecilia, and the first church built on top, right there, the first church, and the one on top is the second church built. But you walk in and there's a cloister, and if you happen to be there at 6 p.m., the nuns have vespers. And you sit there, oh no, now they're doing them at 7. And you sit there and you hear this angelic sound. But if you've been there long enough, it means that you were able to make friends with the nun that has the keys to take you upstairs on top of Santa Cecilia Church, where the choir, it should be more or less a choir stall, but it's not. It went through many, many changes. But what do you have upstairs? You have, you know, ancient buildings. You tear down a wall to build something else, then you add something else, and pretty soon somebody comes along and needs to do some work, and so they break through and they find behind it all sorts of ancient work, which is important. Cavallini, who worked at the end of the Middle Ages, at the time of Giotto, more or less, he frescoed that whole area, and it was behind walls, behind other walls that were pulled up, and it is exquisite. And then from there you can look down at the church. The church has columns that date back to the Roman period, right? So each column is different because churches were made out of pieces from pagan temples, because paganism went out and Christianity was the main religion, and therefore they pilfered the pagan temples and built the churches, the Christian temples, with the elements from the pagan temples. Or they took the temples themselves and converted them, just moved things around, took down the idols and put up the saints. Not idols, saints. This is an exquisite, I can't take everybody there because they wouldn't there's too much to take in. I need half a day.
Well, I mean, I think you need about 3 weeks to go through Rome by the sounds of it. I mean, obviously I live in London, so in London we have so much to offer. You know, we're very similar in terms of that history, different type of history, but there's no way you could spend like a week here and get something done. I think it's the same for Rome. I think Rome, you probably need to go back maybe 3, 4, 5 times to really truly get to know Rome from a visual perspective, but also understanding from a knowledge background. It's key. Now, obviously, I am conscious of time, so I'm going to just quickly ask the agents. We are going to open up questions to Laila in a minute. So if any of you want to put any questions, please put them into the group chat, and I will ask Laila as soon as we have finished these last 2 questions. So Laila, we are doing something with everyone on our podcast, and it's asking 2 simple questions. It's just a bit of fun for the end of every call. Now, bear in mind, you cannot choose the country you're in when I ask the second question. So it's just a little bit of fun. And so the first question is, what does travel mean to you?
It's learning. You know, learning, having answers to questions. That's what Rome did for me. It answered a lot of my questions. And then traveling through Italy answers a lot of the questions. Going to England, to London, answers a lot of questions. You've got to learn. We can't just sit in a corner. We've got to learn about history of man. I mean, there's so much.
I like it. I like that everyone's asking. So on our first podcast, we had a different answer, which is great. I'm expecting different answers, but what I'm expecting to see, and what I have seen in both calls, is passion. So again, something that travel offers is passion, and people truly love their jobs in travel. So which is why we're all praying and hoping that this comes back to normal at some stage in the next year, so that we can do these sort of mass tours and go into these museums. Obviously, it's going to be in a different way, definitely a different perspective of how we're going to treat it. But once we get back, me myself, I am going to be straight on a plane and going to do something, because I agree with you. It is about learning. It's about getting steeped in someone else's culture and understanding humanity as a whole. We're not just from each place. We're all the same. So it's about learning about each different culture, their different foods, their different places to go, and understanding the history, because we're all connected in some way or another. Now, my second question, again, please be reminded, you cannot say your own country. What is your favorite destination and why?
I cannot say my own country.
You cannot. No. I know you would say it. So outside of Italy, what would be your favorite and why?
Okay. I love Europe. So it would be, I think England is fascinating. I think Spain is fascinating. I've traveled all of Europe. Also, as an interpreter, I worked in a lot of Arab countries, and Algeria, I worked there for many years, and I am in love with Algeria. It's something different than the other countries. It has a little bit of everything. It's like being sometimes in the Maghreb, you're like the pre-desert, you're like in the Grand Canyon. It's like being in the Grand Canyon. You've got the desert, the Grand Canyon. You've got a beautiful coastline. And you've got so many different contrasts even there. So Algeria is one of my favorite countries too.
Okay.
Outside of Europe. Of course, the United States. Of course, the United States.
You can only pick one.
It'd be difficult to pick one.
Because I know the world is such an amazing place. I mean, I think every country in the world has something to offer, everything. But there has to always be a one. There always has to be a favorite. I mean, even for me, I love this world. There's been so many amazing places I've been to. I live in London, and my favorite place is London. I know that sounds super sad, but we have so much in terms of history and so much to offer.
Functions perfectly. Does it still?
Yes. Maybe not quite now, but yes, it usually does. Okay. Sorry, good.
One thing is that I was amazed through this whole COVID period how Italians really worked hard at following the rules. I was amazed, and I'm proud of them. They really did a good job. It hit us hard, surprisingly, but they picked up, and everybody did their part. And I'm really okay. That's it.
No, I think it's represented across the world. I think at a time like this, when it is so important to do exactly what needs to be done, I say that lightly, but you have to work together to get through these things. And although it's not in the same instinct, if you look at the history where hard times have come, it's the way we've got through them is coming through together, and we're having to do that again. And fortunately, people seem to be adhering and doing the right things to make sure that we can get through this. And fingers crossed, we get through it very soon, and we can try to get back to some sort of normality, and people get to travel again. People get to live again, because for me, travel is about living. Okay, so I'm going to send off to the chat now. We've got a few questions from people. So, Laila, our first one is from Duran. He's asked, what would you be doing if you weren't a tour guide?
I've always been interested in archaeology. And also, I was here on alternative energy sources, geothermal, wind, probably, and I probably would still be working at the CNR.
Okay, interesting.
Because I'm very interested in this earth, in this world.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a geothermal country. We're right here. Italy really is Africa. From after the Alps, that's all Africa. It's just that it shifted. It's amazing. It's amazing. I would never consider one thing: going out of this world. No, not going up there.
I have to go against you on that one. If I can get a trip to I mean, I think is one of my wants in life. Hopefully it's in my time. I'm sure it will be, is to go just on an outer ring and just see Earth from space. That would be absolutely amazing.
From space would be lovely, but I would never go on there.
Okay, Laila, I've got another one from Stella, who's asking, what other city would you combine with Rome if we traveled for a week to Italy? Can you suggest any unusual destinations or ones that we wouldn't usually book?
I would go, now Rome is a big city, monumental city. I would go, Italy is known for its little tiny, they're called Borgo, B-O-R-G-O. In last week's, because I'm doing these audio virtual tours, in last week's, I brought everybody, all my clients, I brought them to Bagno Vignoni, which is a little tiny spot, and it's in Tuscany, but then not necessarily that one. There's so many beautiful spots, but that one has the center square happens to be the source of thermal hot water that has been used to cure all sorts of ailments for thousands of years. The Etruscans, the Romans, we used them too. And I've seen miracles in those waters. The main square is the pool of water from where it comes, 49 degrees Celsius. Of course, you're not going to go bathe there. It's detoured to a pool. And there you bathe, and then you have the mud, and you have all sorts of, but it's where, on top of a hilltop, the population is 30 people, and from there, you're bathing in this pool, and you're looking down, and you're looking at this greenery, the different colors of green of the Renaissance. It's typical of Tuscany, and the vineyards, and the food is excellent. That town has 30 people. The restaurants all belong to the same family because the mother does one, the husband does the other, and the food is excellent. And you can go trekking, you can just relax. And there's also history there. Plus, you're just a few minutes away to go visit art cities that are a little bigger than this.
Well, I love that when we talk to anyone who's doing tour guides for their specific destination, how much they know. You think when you work in travel that you know something, but you really, you really don't. I have such an abstract view of things. There's so much even for me to learn. So it's been a pleasure. Just last question from Lily. What would be the next destination you would like to explore once COVID-19 has been relaxed?
Well, has been relaxed is a very vague term. Can you be more precise?
Let's say COVID-19. We've got no vaccine, but we've dealt with it, and you're allowed to go. We're finally allowed to go elsewhere. Borders are open, and it's sort of back to normality. What would be the next place you go to? Right
now, we don't have the vaccine. I would go south. I would go south, which is lovely. And so I would go to Sicily. I would go to all the minor islands, and they're little worlds on their own. I would go to Puglia region, which is the heel of the boot. You have a mixture of Arabic, Norman, Greek, and you have them all within a few minutes drive, or you can even walk. In 20 minutes drive, you're in a totally different world. And they're still small, and they're still very unique, and they have a totally different, it's like being in another world, not in Italy, not in this part of Italy. You're not in Tuscany, you're not in Lazio region. Or I would start from south, which is what I'm beginning to do, south. And there are little tiny little gems along the Amalfi Coast that nobody knows about because they drive the Amalfi Coast and that's it, you know. But there are little tiny jewels along the way. I would drive that whole way all the way down to Puglia region. And then Puglia itself is calcium stone and vegetation. But where it's calcium stone, you have grottos, and inside those grottos, there are little roads made. And inside those grottos, you can even have like a floor. Part of it has been worn away by the water, and part of it is still there, but it's eternal. It'll stay there forever. And they've created hotels on top and the restaurant sitting right on that platform. And there you are. And underneath is the water of the grotto. So you see guys coming in with their fishing boats, and they're going in. One guy is singing to his sweetheart, and he's coming in, and you're just sitting there eating this fabulous plate of fresh fish that comes from over there. And places like this. And then the cone homes, Alberobello, the grottos with the stalactites and concerts inside those stalactite grottos. Incredible. And then the cave dwellings, Maratea. Last year it was considered, it was named the culture city of Europe. And all of these beautiful places in the south that are not overly run, and they're beautiful. That's where I'm heading right now.